breakthrough in the wars in the Middle East tonight, with the Israeli Security Cabinet agreeing to end the fighting with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Over the next 60 days, Israel will withdraw its troops after invading the country nearly 2 months ago in response to almost a year of rocket attacks from Hezbollah based in southern Lebanon. President Biden said the ceasefire is a crucial step towards achieving peace and prosperity in the Middle East. Well, the deal would see Hezbollah fighters moving some 30 kilometers away from the Israeli border north of the Litani River. Israeli troops would then gradually pull out of the country. A UN force would remain in the south, and over time there'd be an increased Lebanese military presence there too. In a moment, Hugo Buchega will have the latest from Beirut after a day of intense Israeli airstrikes ahead of the ceasefire announcement. And Lucy Williamson will be reporting on the Israeli communities now hoping to return to their homes in the border region. But first, Sarah Smith is live in Washington, where President Biden has just been giving details of the truce, which was brokered by America. Sarah, President Biden called this a good day.
Yes, and said that he had very good news from the Middle East. This has taken months of really intensive diplomatic effort from America and some other allies to get to this point. And President Biden is, of course, very relieved to be able to announce this just before he's getting ready to leave office in a couple of months' time. So I think he was very pleased to be able to say that both Hezbollah, and Israel have accepted this deal to end the conflict and to allow all of those people who have effectively been living as refugees in both Lebanon and Israel to return to their homes.
Effective at 4 a.m. tomorrow local time, the fighting across the Lebanese-Israeli border will end. Will end. This is designed to be a permanent cessation of hostilities. What is left of Hezbollah and other terrorist organizations will not be allowed, I emphasize, will not be allowed to threaten the security of Israel again.
So what the deal will involve is Hezbollah moving its forces north about 30 kilometres and having to remain there while the Israeli army pulls out south back into Israel proper. And that will be policed by the Lebanese army and other international allies. The Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, had a different job to sell this to his country and to his government. So he was stressing what Israel has achieved in this conflict, that Hezbollah has been set back decades, he said, as well as several of their most senior commanders killed, and pointing out that if they do violate this deal in any way, including trying to rearm themselves, then Israel can and will attack them. Now, it was really interesting when President Biden was speaking here at the White House just not that long ago. He also said that he now wanted to make another serious push to achieve a peace deal in Gaza. He's got 2 months left in office, but he thinks it's worth entering those talks now in order to try and do that. And Donald Trump is on his way into the White House, of course, has been fully briefed on this deal. His team are said to look on it favourably, and he's almost trying to take credit for this already himself, saying that actors in the region are moving to make peace now because he's been re-elected to the White House.
All right. Sarah, thank you for that. Sarah Smith, our North America editor there, just outside the White House. Well, as you heard Sarah say there, it's hoped the ceasefire deal will see many tens of thousands of civilians on both sides return safely to their homes in the border region. Lucy Williamson has been to northern Israel to speak to some of those who left their homes.
In northern Israel, sirens warned of rockets, as residents warned of surrender. Israel's pounding of Lebanon continued hours before the ceasefire was announced. Rona and On left their home in Kfar Giladi on the 8th of October last year. The Lebanese villages they lived alongside, clearly visible through the border fence.
I hope for a day where we could, be at peace with each other. And I think that trust was broken when our army found the tunnels and the ammunition and all of these preparations to effectively come and massacre us.
Their house and community empty for more than a year.
Okay. I'm sorry about the mess. It's just we put everything inside.
A ceasefire deal is meant to get them permanently back home, but it could mean their Lebanese neighbours returning too.
Apart from completely erasing these villages and having no people here, there is no real physical thing that can make me feel safe. It's just, hope.
Israel's leader has achieved many of his war goals in Lebanon. These Lebanese border villages now empty, controlled by Israeli forces. But there are also compelling domestic reasons for ending this war, like getting residents on this side of the border back home. Israel's forces are tired and its economy is suffering. But Hezbollah, damaged but intact, is still fighting. And some ask why their prime minister, fighting a much weaker enemy in Gaza, is signing a ceasefire in the north. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Northern Israel.
Well, that ceasefire will begin in the early hours of tomorrow morning. But earlier today, before the announcement, Israel launched extensive airstrikes on Beirut's southern suburbs, as Hugo Bachega now reports.
As Lebanon waited for a ceasefire, the war didn't stop. The most intense Israeli bombardment of Beirut in this conflict. The Israeli military said these were Hezbollah facilities. Here, it gave a warning before attacking. Here, in central Beirut, it didn't. This building collapsed. 7 people were killed. In the evening, we tried to visit the site. But we were caught up in another wave of Israeli airstrikes. So there has been an attack now. We're now hearing several explosions after an evacuation warning was issued by the Israeli military. We've been trying to get to the site of one of the attacks, but we've been told that the site had been evacuated because of those warnings. Israel is now unleashing a wave of attacks targeting Beirut just hours before this possible ceasefire. People tried to flee. There was chaos. This war has been devastating for Lebanon. Hezbollah has been severely damaged, but it hasn't been destroyed. This deal may bring the conflict with Israel to an end, but many here fear a new internal conflict could follow. Hugo Bachega, BBC News, Beirut.
Well, what could the peace deal mean for the war in Gaza? Frank Gardner's live in Jerusalem. Frank, that's the big question, isn't it? Because that war to the south, what's been happening there?
That is, of course, now once again the core conflict in the Middle East. And Clive, I think it really depends on whether you see the glass as half full or half empty. Because optimists would say, look, if you can do a deal for Lebanon, you can do one for Gaza. And it wasn't that long ago that Antony Blinken was in London, the US Secretary of State, saying we are 90% of the way there. It's just the last 10%. But pessimists are saying, you know what, this is going to make it even harder. And Israel is now going to redouble its military efforts on Gaza. The conflict continues. I think the sticking point here is that for Hamas to release those hostages and sign a peace deal, they want to see some undertaking that Israel is going to withdraw its forces from Gaza and stay out. Israel doesn't want to do that because it says that it doesn't want to abandon the border between Gaza and Egypt because it worries that Hamas will simply use it to smuggle weapons in again and fire rockets at them. They've got to try and get through this. Qatar, the big mediator, recently withdrew from mediating, saying the two sides need to get closer to have some common ground. We're not there yet, but it's still a doable deal.